This book, The History of the Second Advent Message by Isaac Welcome, is fascinating on so many levels. It was written by an actual Adventist in the 1870s who had accepted the teachings of William Miller. He actually lived through the Great Disappointment of 1844. This makes the book even more super interesting because you get not only the facts about the history, but you get insight into the mindset of the Millerites, as well as the groups that formed subsequent to 1844 and continued on with similar doctrines. In this book, there's so many parallels with the Watchtower, both in their early days up until now. As for Russell, it makes one wonder if a lot of his present truth was simply recycled new light. Similarity number one, the discarding and disregarding of all past Bible scholars, theologians, and church fathers. Just like William Miller, Russell made this big claim to having a long period of studying the Bible with no bias, claiming to start from scratch, so to speak. Miller claimed to lay aside all commentaries and used only marginal references and concordances. He determined to lay aside all presuppositions and former views. Russell made similar claims to independent and unbiased Bible study, almost using the same words. Was he mimicking Miller's claim on purpose? Was he a William Miller wannabe? Both Russell and Miller's idea of finding all truth on their own with no regard for past Christian teaching or history is not what the Reformers meant by sola scriptura. Even a cursory reading of their writings will show they referenced the early church fathers and scholars often. The stance of the Reformers was not to discard and neglect tradition and everything that had gone before, but they were against elevating it to an inspired status above that of Scripture. Both Luther and Calvin valued the early creeds, church fathers, and tradition very highly. Russell and Miller's distortion of sola scriptura could more accurately be called solo scriptura. Jaroslav Pelikan, in his book, The Christian Tradition, Volume 1, speaks about an idea that was commonly held in the early centuries of church history. Ubique semper ab omnibus, or everywhere, always, by all, or universality, antiquity, and consensus. To quote Pelikan, the criterion of universality required that a doctrine, to be recognized as a teaching of the church, rather than the private theory of a man or of a school, be genuinely Catholic. Not Roman Catholic, just small c Catholic meaning universal. That is, be the confession of all the churches, one great horde of people from Palestine to Chalcedon, with one voice, re-echoing the praises of Christ. In one dogmatic conflict after another, this argument had been used to refute heresy. Antiquity was an essential component of tradition. Those who claimed to be wise in their own learning overlooked the ancient learning of the fathers, and against them it was necessary to cite the authority of the witness of the ancients. Heretics would bring forth as something new that is not contained in the old books of the ancient fathers or in the Bible. It is interesting to note that although Russell boasted of paying no mind to the wisdom and learning of the ages, did he recommend that others do the same and pay no mind to him and use only the Bible? No, quite the opposite. He clearly stated that without his studies in the Scriptures, using the Bible alone, people would get so off track as to go out into darkness. For Russell, it was supposedly solo scriptura. For others, his new light and present truth were required. So, in summary, from the time of the Millerite movement through the post-disappointment groups, people simply changed whose interpretations they followed. The fathers, creeds, and reformers were discarded and exchanged for the likes of William Miller, Charles Russell, and Ellen White.